So now that we've worked on writing equations for lines, now we want to start looking at some other ways that we can write equations, some even more special lines. So we're going to take what we've done in the past so far and add another piece to that. First, we got to make sure we understand that other piece. So this lesson that you're learning tonight is very, very important for what we're about to do next. So make sure you got a good grasp on what's happening here. Okay, so you've got your sheet printed out, I hope. And we're going to go ahead and take, if you didn't print your sheet out, take a moment to pause and print that out, or take notes on regular paper. It doesn't matter either way to me, but you definitely want to take notes on this and try these examples. So let's look at our notes for this unit. So what I want you to do, take a moment and try to figure out what is the middle number between 3 and 7. Simple problem. Take a moment to do that. All right, so you found your middle number between 3 and 7, and you probably said 5. Easy as that. Okay, how about the middle number between 5 and 27? Take a moment to figure that one out. Okay, you probably came up with 16. All right, now, you may have done these just by making a number line, counting backwards, something like that, but here's what I want you to do now. Think of a way to mathematically come up with a number between 16, that's right in the middle, dead center of 16 and 215. Take a moment to do that and think about the math you're doing. Go. All right, so hopefully you came up with a number that's something like 231 over 2. There's an interesting number. So how do we come up with these? What did you do? Write me a formula where if I've got any two numbers, A and B, so like 16 and 215, what kind of formula could I use to find the middle number between A and B? Give me your formula. So hopefully you came up with that middle number. What I was doing is adding the 2 and divide by 2. That's a really easy way to find that middle number. That gives that center every single time. Basically, in this case, what you're doing is you're finding the average. The average of two numbers will be the number right in the middle. So this middle number is the average of two numbers. Okay. Now, obviously, when we get into three numbers, it gets a little different to find the average. But this is when you were finding like the mean of a problem. And if it were an odd number or an even number, you take the two middle numbers and add them together, divide by 2. So you'd find the average of those two, and that would be your middle number. We can use this idea of finding a middle number to find the midpoint between two coordinates. Okay, so when we've got, say, a segment AB, and I want to find the midpoint, which we'll call M, I can do that by using the coordinates. So I'll call this coordinate x1, y1, and this coordinate x2, y2. So if I use those coordinates and do the same thing, the middle is going to be the middle of the x's. So I take the middle number of each x's, or the average of the x's, and the average of the y's, which makes sense because remember, we're getting x and y coordinates. So the middle x coordinate is the middle of the x's. The middle of the y coordinate is the middle of the y's. This is my midpoint formula. Notice a couple things. It's got parentheses around it because the middle is a midpoint. Points have to have parentheses. It's got a comma between the x coordinate and the y coordinate. But this is how we can do that. Let's look at a quick example. The endpoints of segment AB are the A and B here. We need to find the midpoint. So my midpoint formula says if I just add the two x's together, -1 plus 5 divided by 2, and add the two y's together, 1 plus -1, so that's just going to turn into -1 divided by 2. So now that midpoint becomes, I always call it M. You can really call it anything, but we tend to use M. So that's going to be 4 over 2 and 0 over 2. So my midpoint is 2, 0. And there's the midpoint between those two coordinates. So give it a shot yourself. Find the midpoint of segment PQ, and here's your coordinates. Go. So again, hopefully you said my midpoint, I'll do negative 8 plus 14 over 2 and 13 plus 7 over 2. So that's going to give me negative 8 and 14. If I need to use my calculator, I will. Is 6 over 2. I don't know why I had to use my calculator for that. Sometimes my brain goes dead. 20 over 2. Always simplify. So my midpoint is 310. And there you go. Simple as that. So here's one. One endpoint is 39. The midpoint is 05. What's the other endpoint? Let's draw a quick picture of that. So here's 3 endpoint. Here's my midpoint. See if you can come up with what that point is. Think about it. Try it on your own first, and then we'll see a mathematical way to do it. But I think you might be able to come up with this just thinking through it. Okay, so you probably thought your way through it and came up with an answer. Here's how I would approach it mathematically, because sometimes the numbers can get messy. The midpoint is 0.5, and that's going to be equal if I average my x's. So I'll call this x, y. So x plus 3 over 2 and y plus 9 over 2. So that's using my midpoint formula to get the midpoint. Now this x coordinate should equal 0. So 0 should equal x plus 3 over 2. This y coordinate should equal this. So 5 should equal y plus 9 over 2. Now I've got two problems to solve, and they're simple algebra problems. Cross multiply. So 0 times 2 is 0, x plus 3, which means x is negative 3. Cross multiply. 10 equals y plus 9. Subtract 9, so y is 1. So now I got to rewrite it because I do want the other endpoint. So that other endpoint is my x coordinate is negative 3. My y coordinate is 1. And there you go. That would do it. So this is the idea of using our formula to come up with an answer. That way, if I make a mistake, I can find my mistake in my work. Okay? So now it's your turn to try some. This is going to be your classwork. I'm going to give you a second to do these. Try these 3 problems first, and we'll come to a conclusion on them, okay? All I want you to do, find the midpoints. Go. All right, so let's go ahead and find some midpoints. My midpoint, 12 minus 6 over 2. Notice I changed it, instead of plus, I changed it to minus, because that's a negative 6. 7 plus 15 over 2. So my midpoint will be 6 over 2. And let's see, that's going to be 22 over 2. So the midpoint on this first one is 311. Try the next one. Simple enough. Negative 17 minus 1 over 2. Negative 8 plus 11 over 2. I highly encourage you to write this information out, or else you end up doing something silly. Okay, it's real easy to make stupid mistakes. So my midpoint is negative 9. And you know what? Leave that as a fraction. Okay? I know you probably said 1.5, but I want you to get used to fractions. They're going to be way more useful for you. Okay, the last one. 14 minus 3 over 2, and my y's are negative 7 plus 18 over 2. So 14 minus 3 is 11 over 2. Negative 7 and 18 should give me also 11 over 2. I can't simplify that, so let's leave it the way it is. Okay, another challenge problem for you. Midpoint is AB, so midpoint is M, point A. What's the coordinates of B? Take a shot at that one and try to do it mathematically. Don't just poke around at numbers. Go. All right, so I'm going to set up my formula. I know what the midpoint is. So negative 3, 4 is the midpoint, and it should equal this negative 5 plus my x over 2, 7 plus my y over 2. By the way, if you switch that, if you did x minus 5, y plus 7, same thing. It's going to work. So negative 3 equals negative 5 plus x over 2. 4 should equal 7 plus y over 2. Little cross multiplying. Negative 5 plus that is going to be negative 6. so x is -1. Cross multiply, 7 plus y equals 8, so y is +1. So the coordinates of point B are x value, -1, y value, +1. Okay, very simple work. I want you to try that. So your homework tonight is actually do 4 problems. And I'll put these answers up online. They're at the end of this video. You'll find a PDF of them. Except this one, you might not find a PDF answers for this because I want to discuss this in class. So you better bring some good discussion in class tomorrow. Okay, so there you go. Try it. I'll see you tomorrow, and we'll talk about how we can use the midpoint for equations of lines. Good night.